were attached, or that 5 shots was finally enough to convince him that he shouldn't continue to press. The concern I have simply here is that it is very hard to say that we want our police force to have a certain level of self-defense that we would then deny to our citizens. Because these threats exist. I mean, we're hearing direct testimony about the fact that we face these problems in places where you don't expect to face them. And to say to me that even though I probably have a right to carry a firearm in public, but I can't carry with more than arbitrary number 7, arbitrary number 10, arbitrary number 12, that's problematic. Because where is the final line there? Is it 1? All of a sudden New York has told us it's 7. I don't think that's appropriate. I think there are an ability, if you ask a constitutional question, to limit magazine size, but it's probably what's come. So are 50-round or 100-round Beta C magazines bannable? Probably. But are 30-round AR-15 magazines bannable? I highly doubt it, because it is the common configuration of the AR-15, the most popular rifle in the world.
Laurie, if I could ask you, gun rights advocates often claim that these new proposals, the new kinds of laws that we're talking about now, are not going to be effective, that criminals will still be able to get access to guns, that you're only really going to be disarming people who are law-abiding and who respect those laws. Surely there's some element of truth to that statement, that criminals will not follow the law often. Why are you hopeful that these new reforms will actually have an impact at reducing gun violence?
Well, because we know that background checks have made a difference. We've been able to block 1.7 million gun sales from going through since 1999. So we know that that's made a difference. And we know that there are some horrific crimes that might not have taken place if background checks, universal background checks were in place and they were operating as they're supposed to. The Virginia Tech shooter was able to obtain a weapon. I believe he did not have to go through a background check. A man who was threatening his life in Wisconsin, and there was a restraining order against him. It was actually in Virginia Tech, the mental health, he had been deemed mentally unstable by a judge, and that information was not conveyed to the national background check system, so he was able to successfully pass the background check and obtain the weapon that he used to kill 30-plus people. And so we know that it makes a difference. So that's why we're hopeful that it will continue to make a difference. It's absolutely true. We're not going to stop every bad person from buying a gun, but shouldn't we make it as hard as we can? And shouldn't we block as many as we can from getting the weapons? When we talk about 80% of weapons purchased for criminal intent are purchased without a background check, I think it just logically follows that it makes sense to put that in place. And make sure it's universal, and as the chief said, that our adjoining state doesn't have a different set of laws so that people are able to obtain weapons or without a background check and then bring them into a state that says, no, we want universal background checks.
And Marc, you mentioned earlier that that the latest reports out of Washington are not looking good for the universal background check, which seem to be the law most likely to be adopted in the wake of Newtown. And Chief Beck mentioned the difficulty of state patchwork of laws. Why is it so difficult to get laws passed?
I'm glad you asked me, because I was going to give you the answer, but I'm going to give you another what question you're going to ask. Which is, I think we should bring this down to reality, because we're sort of debating how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, because whatever our personal opinions are about this magazine or that magazine, this comes down to politics. And what's actually going to be law and what isn't going to be law and how you achieve that. By the way, I agree with Chief Beck that you don't need 10 rounds, more than 10 rounds for anything in a magazine. I was merely saying that these magazines there's millions of them available. They're not going to go away. They're going to be around for decades. And anybody who's going to want to commit a mass murder is going to be able to commit it, with or without the law. What concerns me is the following. We are having this debate because of Sandy Hook in Newtown. But there's a Sandy Hook in Newtown every day. There's about 30 or 33 people who die with gun violence every day in the United States. Politically, I'll be very specific here. These people who are now proposing gun control, in this case primarily Democrats, have been silent on this issue for more than 10 years. They stayed away from it of radioactivity. And it didn't matter that there was a new town every day. So the problem was, and I'll be really frank, the problem was that the people who were being killed primarily, not exclusively, but the people who were being killed primarily were urban youth shooting each other, or faceless spouses, or armed robberies, which are the three categories of people really dying in violence. They weren't 6-year-olds, which is, of course, more horrific. But there is a certain, I'm going to go out on a limb here, there's a certain sort of institutional, I don't want to call it racism, but sort of a benign neglect of the real problem here. Because I'm going to say it. I swore tonight I wasn't going to say it, but I'm going to say it. The real problem we face are not mass killings. As horrific as they are, there's 7 or 8 or 10 of them a year in a very violent country of 300 million people. And somebody who's a psychopath who wants to kill 20 children are going to kill them with any law that's on the book. If they can't get the gun in Los Angeles or Nevada, then they'll buy it on the black market because they're psychopaths. Okay? They're not just gun lovers. NRA members don't go around killing people, even though the NRA leadership effectively blocks any regulation of it. But your average person who's at a gun show, who's at the gun range, they're not killing people. So it's a little pie in the sky, but I don't want to hog this. I'll finish in 2 minutes. It's a little pie in the sky, but I'm going to say that the real problem that we face is how we deal with gangs, how we deal with poverty in the city, how we deal with education, how we suppress those gangs, how we provide funding for our youth, infrastructure for our cities, because if you don't do that, it doesn't matter what laws you have. The second point I want to make is about getting the laws. We're not going to get, I'm going to go out on a limb, I'm a journalist, there isn't going to be any gun control legislation forthcoming. The most that's going to happen, as I read news tonight, is there will be a very weak measure on gun trafficking. And even universal background checks aren't going to happen. So, and if they happen, they're not going to be really universal. So let me go down the list. There isn't going to be universal background checks. There isn't going to be an assault weapons ban. And there isn't going to be a ban on high-capacity magazines. Okay? There isn't. Not this round. Now, as somebody who believes in gun control, I want to see us achieve whatever sort of gun control we may or may not agree upon, whatever levels there are. We can't do that unless we are focused and we are strategic and we understand what the real problem is. And as I said, and this is going to be a process of 20 or 30 years to slowly move towards something like this. And you have to begin somewhere. We're doing something very weak now. But that's why I'm saying that we have to find a way to build coalitions with the folks at Calguns who are going to disagree with us on certain things, probably most things. But we have to find ways to do that, and we have to be realistic about what we can do, or else nothing's going to get done. As of today, nothing's going to get done.
And I'd really like to jump in and answer your question, which follows along on that. We're talking about universal background checks. The problem is we're not talking about universal background checks. We're talking about expensive partial registration with universal background checks. And there lies a large piece of the rub. You know, if we were talking about being able to prove that, for example, if I had a concealed carry license or I had another permit that proved that I was not a felon, was otherwise available, then I should be able to skip the background check because I can prove that. I should be able to go to atf.gov and type in as the buyer my personal information and get a 30-day background check. And maybe we make it clearly illegal for someone to sell to someone without one of those 2 pieces of paper. But what I don't want to do is create another record of which gun I own. And that's actually a major problem. I mean, people, how do I put it, at the state level it's a little bit less effective because you have a little more control of your state and these sorts of things. But there are some more constitutional issues with building an entire registry of firearms.
And why is that?
Yeah, what's the problem with it?
Because, look, registration generally leads to confiscation as it has here in California. Registration, look, there's a bill today, still in Sacramento. There's a bill, no, in fact, we've confiscated SKSs here, okay?
Those are AK-47.
No, they're not, they're the predecessor, okay? But but they are, by the way, generally come in 10-round mag only. They were told that they were legal to keep, and then they were told they weren't illegal to keep, turned them in, sir. We've got a study bill in Sacramento. How do we seize the already registered AR-15s? Okay, it's not, we should ask politicians not to put those in the docket.
Excuse me, this is the other problem, because I've criticized the gun control advocates. But the gun advocates use this scare tactic of gun grabbers. And you and I both know that guns are not being grabbed. I don't know the details on the SKS, but I would tell you this, that you know that that's an anomaly.
LA is about to pass a magazine confiscation law. So, you know, when we start talking about this non-confiscation,
all I'm saying is that if you are for what you say you're for, then I hope that you will put the weight of Calguns Foundation behind the NRA and the Republicans and ask them to confirm a director of the ATF. How is it? Can you answer? Well, as somebody who's a gun advocate, what is the justification for holding up for 6 years the confirmation director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms? What credibility do you have in saying that you are for sensible regulation, et cetera, when you won't even, when you collectively...
Be careful with the we, because
okay.
look, there are certainly places I've worked with the NRA.
Do you think the ATF director should be confirmed?
I don't know. The one that's been proposed, no, seriously, the one that's been proposed has issues. You know, he himself, if you're talking about the politics of gun control, has talked about confiscation and assault weapons bans. These are the things that gun owners don't want to talk about. I mean, look, there's something important that Adam said at Gunfight, which was the hope behind Heller and McDonald, was that we could get to a place where we could talk about regulating people instead of regulating arms, that we Second Amendment supporters weren't worried about what you wanted to come in our safe, and either limit the possession of, the future purchase of, the ability to take it to the range, because that's what we're talking about. I mean, it's not a gun ban except unless you want to buy that gun in the future.
Both sides of the debate invest magical properties in the guns that don't, properties that don't exist. Gun owners, gun advocates invest in magical properties. The gun is something holy, sacrosanct, so special, and such an expression of freedom that the federal government doesn't have the right to have the registry of this lethal weapon, which I find absurd.
There's not another single thing in my entire home that I can't give to my kids after I die. Okay.
Try an IRA.
Assault weapons are
and on the other side, not everybody, but gun control advocates invest a magical property in the gun, that they are the embodiment of evil, and if people who fondle these, there's something wrong with them, and et cetera, okay? The fact is that guns are pretty commonplace in the United States. So I don't understand. My car is registered. I have liability if I kill somebody with my car. You know, I have a 400 horsepower car, by the way.
Do you need it?
No. I need it for psychological purposes. Because I can only hold one at a time. So I like to look at them and clean them. But so, you know, I plead guilty to that. I also have expensive shoes that I don't need. But my point is, why the fear? What's the fear? The federal government is you're going to hide the guns in your house. So, and the government is not going to, if the government decides that they're going to confiscate your guns, you don't really think you're going to outshoot them, do you?
No, but I think I'll make it extremely expensive. It's far more tangible than what you like to make it. Do you think that the mayor and the sheriffs, who were also the Klan in Bogalusa, Alabama in 1968, would have liked to have a list of every single firearm that the bodyguards of Martin Luther King had?
I'm sure they would.
I think that's the reason why you hear some of us complain about it.
Yeah.
The simple answer that we're armed, licensing us, I don't think there's much of a pushback here. We're going to go toward, I think, an FOID card in most of the high regulatory states, which fundamentally means that you're going to go out, you're going to get a background check, and you probably get different little check marks that if you've done the training, you'll get to carry. If you've done this, you'll be exempt from that. And that's probably fine, because, you know, the grand scheme, part of owning firearms is a deterrent.
But you moved the goalposts. Now you move the goalposts.
That's not registering my firearm. That's registering me.
You moved the goalposts from possession to the right to carry.
The right to carry is part of the right to keep and bear arms.
Well,
So one of the pieces of legislation that is being talked about in California does have to do with confiscation. It is about comparing criminal records, an updated criminal record, with with the ownership of guns. And it does make sense, doesn't it, to cross-reference that, so people who, since the purchase of guns, have been adjudicated mentally ill or have committed some crime, that they shouldn't have them or have a restraining order against them.
In fact, it's the only thing we should use registration for, and in fact, sadly, we couldn't do that. So 20,000 people are running around California, and the government's not been interested in prioritizing its spending enough.
Well, that is something.
Understand that.
No, that's not true. That's my job.
Okay.
And right now, last week, we did 164 checks.
And I applaud you for that.
Well, but let me finish that. So, because some other municipalities are short-staffed and can't do this, doesn't mean we shouldn't have it available to them. We will, in Los Angeles, we have right about now, we have maybe 120 people that have been 5150 that have been told that they can't have firearms, that still have firearms registered to them. And we'll exhaust that list in the next month or so. But to say that we shouldn't be able to do that, that we shouldn't be, well, then that's something we should all agree on. That a registry of guns compared to a registry of prohibited possessors that is in the hands of the state, because you like the state better than the feds, we should do that, and we do that. Cal DOJ does it. They need more funding. Their system is a little weak, but it's a viable piece. About 100. I'm going to get the numbers wrong. Several hundred people in Los Angeles are added to this list every month that are either newly convicted or newly admitted into a psychiatric ward, and we need to check and make sure their guns are surrendered. Now, the people that have been put into psychiatric care, we don't arrest them. We just take their guns, and then we take clinicians with us. We try to get them back on the right path. Now, people that are prohibited possessors due to criminal nature, we do arrest them. And to think that nobody in government does this is not right. It's not correct.
Certainly, it's just frightening as gun owner when we want to see that happen. Look, I want to stand in front of you, not having had someone 5150 who we knew was 5150 and killed 7 people, and that happened in Los Angeles before he returned. If we're not going to use that registration database for this one true purpose, that gets very frightening. Now, it is starting to head in the right direction. That is a positive thing. As long as people are on these lists and have good due process rights to potentially get back off of them if it's correct, and they do, we don't really have a problem with this kind of thing, because that is the one place where registration might work. Because again, it's about the people, right? When we're talking about this person has been adjudicated by a judge to be a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence convictee. Yes, in fact, California has very rational laws, 10-year prohibition. Unfortunately, the federal government tries to enforce that